scholars, and all the participants. Once again, I welcome you all. Let's start our session with a prayer song. Research scholars, and all the participants. Once again, I welcome you all. Let's start. Viking College for Women has taken various initiatives for the overall development of the students. It's an opportunity to learn through a webinar on the topic English language, the hard journey through centuries. Our focus is for students of all disciplines to groom them socially as well as academically. On behalf of the J&J management, I am profusely elated to take an opportunity to welcome Professor Lal CA, a renowned academic and an eminent speaker from University of Kerala. A bouquet of welcome to you, sir, and thank you for your gracious presence to join us. I am very much delighted to welcome Dr. Sister Shaini, KP Principal, J&J College for Women, to greet the participants.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of J&J College for Women, Tennali, I would like to welcome all the participants to this one-day webinar for students on English language, a hard journey through centuries. I cordially welcome our speaker today, Professor Lal CA from University of Kerala. I thank wholeheartedly Professor Lal for accepting our invitation and his availability today, in spite of his hectic schedule, to share his knowledge with the student community across the country. I'm very happy and congratulate the Department of English for organizing this webinar for the well-being of the students. More than 1,200 enthusiastic students have registered from all over India to enrich their knowledge during this. I hope that this webinar will help the participants to enrich their knowledge on the history of the English language, one of the world's predominant languages used for communication. I wish all the success and implore God's blessings upon all of you to benefit from this seminar. Once again, I welcome all the participants and our resource person, Professor Lal, to share, interact, and make this webinar very enriching and inspiring to all the admirers of learning and mastering English language. Thank you.
Thank you, sister, for your ever-ready support and encouragement. Now I invite Mrs. G. Jyoti Olivia, lecturer in English, the organizing secretary, to introduce our resource person, Professor Lal CA.
It's a great honor for me to introduce Professor Lal CA from University of Kerala, an eminent and excellent speaker for today's national webinar organized by Department of English for students on English language, the hard journey through centuries. Professor Lal CA is an outstanding academician with high profile of educational achievement. He is working as a professor of English in the University of Kerala. He completed his MPhil in 2001 and PhD in 2009 from the University of Kerala. He has shouldered various responsibilities in the University of Kerala as a member of a curriculum committee and a master trainer in the ASAP program of Government of Kerala. He's a member of a Moods Advisory Committee and so on. He received Salute the Silent Worker Award in 2015, Junior Chamber International LTI, honed by a Trust Award for use of ICT in education. As a keen researcher and avid academician profile, Professor Lord CA has authored and edited 6 books, published more than 26 national and international papers in books and journals. He has delivered more than 50 invited talks in seminars, conferences on varied topics. To his credit, he presented papers in the IATEFL conference at Harrogate, UK in 2014 and visited countries like USA, South Korea, and Nepal for academic programs. We are very fortunate to have with us today such versatile personality, a great repository of knowledge. Sir, we wholeheartedly thank you for accepting and sparing your time to share your knowledge and experience with the student community across India. May I invite you, Professor Lal, sir, to begin your session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. A few guidelines regarding the webinar. Dear participants, your questions, doubts, or clarifications can be raised after the talk of the resource person. You will have time to discuss your queries after presentation. For question and answer session, participants are requested to post your queries in the chat box provided. May I now invite Professor Lal CA to continue the session.
Yes. Shall I share my screen?
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please enable screen sharing for me.
Okay, sir.
YouTube nodu.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, hope everybody can see my PowerPoint presentation. Yes. So shall we start? Am I audible to all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes.
You are audible.
Yes. Thank you very much. It's a lovely morning here in Kerala, slightly rainy. And I thank the college and the authorities for inviting me to give this talk to you today. And I am aware that there are many people from other states also listening, including some of my students are here. So I think it is quite a pleasant thing to do in a morning like this. And I have changed the title slightly in the presentation, which is immaterial. I just wanted to replace the adventure with perilous. English, the perilous journey. Well, there is nothing perilous about it, though I was trying to make it light, but there was some precariousness in the course of English history about English language. At the outset, I'd like to say that our interest in English is not due to any particular colonial hangover or due to any particular undue admiration for the English-speaking people. It is largely because English language today is more the language of the world community. It has grown a lot. It has traveled a long way from its original origins up to the present time when we are doing this Zoom session on English language learning and teaching. So what I'll be doing in this talk is to trace the history of English.
Excuse me, sir. Can you please raise your voice? It's low voice, sir.
You can't hear me?
Little bit. It's all right, but please raise your voice.
Because the mic volume is maximum.
Okay, sir. Okay. No, it is okay.
Give me a second. Let me check the computer mic also. How is it now? Is there any difference?
Okay, sir. It's okay.
We are audible, sir.
Better?
Okay, sir.
I hope it will be better soon. You're sure?
Yeah. Okay, sir.
Okay, right. Thank you. So we will begin tracing the history of the perilous journey of English language. Well, I begin with the observation that English was not made in England. English language was not born in England. Now, let me say that what I'm going to say will be known to most teachers of English and also to the students of English. But what I've attempted is to present the whole thing again, restating them from a different angle, a slightly different angle, so that we'll have a kind of refreshment of what we already know. And for many younger beginner learners, there will be a lot of fresh information as well. So we always think of English as the language of England, but interestingly, English did not originate in England. So you can see the picture of England here. This is England, and this is the continental part. This is the ocean, the part of Atlantic Ocean called North Sea, and here this little part is called the English Channel. So English came to these islands, or this huge bit of island, the big major part of the island, from these areas. These areas are Germany, southern Denmark, and Netherlands, modern days. This would be, this Frisian part would be Netherlands, and this area would be, and this tip would be Germany, and you have Denmark here of modern times. So English had its origins somewhere in these areas, and then it came to England and became what we call today English. So English is basically a Germanic language, which came to England, came to the British Islands in mid-5th and 17th century AD by Anglo-Saxon migrants from what is today Germany, South Denmark, and Netherlands. This is a fact known to us. And we know that Germanic is a subdivision of Indo-European language families, and English, for one thing, was not born in England. And here I've given a closer picture of the thing. Yeah, we know that the story of England begins in the continent. At that time, in this part of the world, modern United Kingdom, the language was different. We will look at that in a while. English was not spoken at that time. We are talking about maybe 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century AD, maybe some 1,800 years ago. This island did not have English in it. And there was no English at all at that time. English would evolve later, maybe in the 6th century, 7th century, etc., from a combination of different dialects spoken in these parts. So in these parts of Europe at that time, there was a language called West Germanic, and different tribes speaking West Germanic, including Frisians, Saxons, Angles, and Jutes. They went to different parts of the world, including England and also to other parts of Europe, in search of living space. As we always say about language growth, people move out in search of living space. So Angles, Saxons, and Jutes were the primary people, the major people who came and settled in England. But what was happening in England before they came to England? Here we are interested in 3 major language families. For students, please remember that there is a concept called language families. The language in Andhra, which is Telugu, the language in Kannada, which is Karnataka, which is Kannada, the language in Tamil Nadu, which is Tamil, and the language in Kerala, which is Malayalam. All these four languages belong to one family called Dravidian. That means there was one huge community of people speaking a Proto-Dravidian language, from which these languages slowly evolved as people moved out and settled in different parts. Languages are always growing. Languages never remain static. So in the process of growth, we find that there are different language families. So in Europe, there were three major language families that we are interested in now. Okay, so these families are one Celtic, the other Roman, and the third Germanic. Roman has other names. People call it Romance sometimes. We can call it Italic if we want. Though those are other names for Roman. And modern day languages like Romanian, Italian, Spanish, French, etc., came from this family, and let Celtic be there. And Germanic, we already discussed Germanic. So here you have a picture of a Germanic. It's a reproduction of Germanic people. It's a painting. We do not know how the Germanic people look like. We know about them only from descriptions that we read in different poems and writings of those days. And yes, it is believed that the original inhabitants of England were the Celtic people. This is an ancient reproduction of an ancient image of the Celtic people. The Celtic people, again, which was a big family, and a branch of it lived in England, and they were called the Britons. So the name Britain came from the Celtic tribe that inhabited the islands long back, maybe uh, until, say, 5th century AD. They are still there. The Celtic people are still there. We'll come to that. And then we have another interesting family, of which we have some few Roman soldiers here of long back. So Romance languages, Celtic languages, and Germanic languages are of interest to us when we study English language, English literature, and when we closely study the linguistic features of England as students of literature. These three are very important. Particularly Roman languages are very important because England was exposed to French language for quite a long time. And the influence of French is very, very visible even in the English that we speak today. Many problems we have with English spelling, English pronunciation, etc., is because of the association with Romance languages, originally Latin and later French. And yeah, we'll go to the next slide. What I am trying to say in this slide is that three major language families are closely connected in terms of exchanging linguistic influence and cultural influence: Celtic, Roman, and Germanic. Now we'll look at how it worked. Okay, so I have a bit more to say. The Celtic people were originally there in England. There might have been people before that, we do not know. As far as history is known to us, the Celtic people were living in the British Islands for long. When the Romans came, around 1st century, 2nd century AD, after Julius Caesar. The Romans came and they occupied much of the British Islands, but they were rulers. They did not displace the English people. They were rulers and they administered the Roman rule in England for a long time. And before that, the people who lived were the Celtic people, and they became rather weak over centuries of Roman rule. Celtic people grew weak because they did not have much defenses, because their defenses were taken care of by the Roman soldiers. But by about 5th century, 6th century AD, the Romans withdrew. We have heard of the collapse of the Roman Empire, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. And gradually, Roman soldiers, the Roman legions, Roman administrators pulled out of England. They went back to Italy, where they originally belonged. And the Celtic people were taken over by Germanic tribes. So that is very simply, in the simplest terms, that is how English happened. So the Germanic is a big family. We are interested only in West Germanic, and particularly the Germanic spoken by Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, who came and settled in England, and their languages blended to be known as Old English. And today we speak modern English. Okay. So the close neighbors of English are, in terms of language, English. I have a list here: Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, Icelandic, English, German, Netherlandic, Frisian. Faroes is also there, which is a Frisian also. They are minority languages. So these are all Germanic languages spoken. You can see this is a picture of, I present maps because we need to have a clear idea of the places we talk about geographically. So this is the British Islands, as we call it. And this area is called England. This is called England. And you have a little bit here, which is Wales. And the northern part is called Scotland. And this is Ireland. Ireland is an island. So today, in modern days, Ireland, much part of Ireland, the major part of Ireland is an independent country, whereas this bit is part of what is called United Kingdom. So United Kingdom brings in Ireland, Scotland, part of Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales. Anyway, so as we said, the English language came to England from these parts, and naturally there will be some relation between the languages spoken in these areas and English. But today these similarities are very, very invisible because centuries have passed. Just like Tamil and Kannada, or Telugu and Malayalam have grown very different, though they were maybe thousands of years ago one single language. We have moved away from each other, and our vocabulary, our script, our pronunciation, everything has changed. So that happened with this area also. So the close relatives of English I mentioned are French is a very close relative of English. Maybe English and French would be cousins, the language I mean. Okay, so that is to give you an idea of the area, geographic area. And so, as we said, England has now the Old English period. I said from say the 5th century, English has established more or less, though not fully, because England was still occupied in parts by the Celtic people, and there were different tribes belonging to different dialects of English, like the Angles were there, the Jutes were there, the Frisians were there. They all spoke different varieties, but gradually they were all blending together. And we generally refer to that period, say early 5th century onwards, we refer to that period as Old English period. So Old English would sound today to our ears, to our eyes, Old English would look like and sound like a very different and foreign language. So I've titled my talk, the Perilous Journey. And I have mentioned perilous because English, the journey of English has been has not been very smooth. England language developed in England, it grew and it was forming itself, but then it faced many linguistic threats. So this peril is not physical damage to the people; it is linguistic threat to the language. There was a threat. There were such immense threats at times that it looked as if English was going to totally disappear. Well, the first peril, I would say, you should take my word peril with qualification, came with Christianity coming into England. Now, we must remember, England was ruled by the Romans soon after Christianity began to spread in Europe. So naturally, when the Roman rulers converted themselves into Christianity, including King Constantine, Christianity was established in England as well by the Roman soldiers, and the Roman legions who were in England had established Christianity. But the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes who came later and destroyed much of the culture of the Celtic people, they were not Christians. They had other gods they worshipped. They had other systems of worship. So by the year, we have given this year, by when King Ethelbert ruled England in the 6th century, England did not have much Christian presence in it. Though in some parts there was Christianity was very much there in Europe, particularly in French provinces in Spain, etc. Christianity was widely in vogue at that time. But in English Island, Christianity came in a big way during the reign of King Ethelbert. He ruled. This is his period of rule, 150.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, this is that's his lifetime. He ruled until 16.
Lal,
So
sir.
when King Ethelbert was ruling, you had you saw they had the arrival of Saint Augustine at Canterbury.
Excuse me, sir.
So
Lal, sir.
literature students will be familiar with this word Saint Augustine. We must remember that there are two Saint Augustines. There is another Augustine who lived earlier in the 4th century. His name is also a Saint Augustine. He is called Saint Augustine of Hippo, the person who wrote the book named Confession.
Excuse me, sir. Lal,
But
sir.
this is a different Saint Augustine.
Excuse
He
me.
was sent to England by Pope Gregory.
Lal, sir.
Oh, yes, sir.
Sir, can I? Some participants are waiting to join the Zoom, sir.
Okay.
Can I take the host permission? And next, after that, I will give you host
Oh, yeah,
permission.
fine. Yeah, I'll wait.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. వస్తా సిస్టర్ Sir, you can speak, sir. I will give screen sharing, host permission to you. After joining, you can continue, sir.
Shall I continue?
Okay, sir.
The screen is visible?
Screen is visible, sir.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So, sorry about the break. We'll continue. Look at the picture of the king here. It's not a picture, it's a bronze statue of the king. And you can see a structure behind in the background, which is the Cathedral of Canterbury, And in the neighborhood, there is also a huge monastery. The ruins of the monastery are visible in the neighborhood. That is an old story, which I'd like to tell you. So King Ethelbert was the king of England from 550 to 1660. And he was married. He was what maybe in Christian terms, he was a heathen in the sense that he was not Christian. He was an Anglo-Saxon king. And he was married to Bertha, a European lady, and she was a Christian woman. So he had a soft corner towards Christianity because his wife was already a Christian. And interestingly, in the neighborhood where the statue is, there is a small church called Saint Martin's Church, which is very, very old. It's something like 2,500 years old, because it was built during the Roman times, and Ethelbert converted it into a church for his wife. And it is the oldest church in England where service continuously going on. So even today in that little church, people congregate and they have services. And if you go to that church, you will see a small door which is sealed up on a side, which was a door through which King Ethelbert's wife Bertha went into worship. So that was a background where Saint Augustine came to England. Saint Augustine, who became a saint later, Augustine, he was a monk. He came from Rome. He spoke the Latin language at that time, and he came to England. and with the permission of King Ethelbert, established himself in this church called Saint Martin. Later, gradually, a monastery grew up, and Saint Augustine is today remembered as the first Archbishop of England. The Archbishop of England is always called the Archbishop of Canterbury, though his seat is not today, it's not in Canterbury. So Canterbury is a place in England which is very rather near France, though a little bit of ocean is there. Strategically, historically, Canterbury is very, very important. Yeah, to literature people, we hear about the murder in the cathedral and the journey of the pilgrims in Canterbury Tales. So Canterbury is part of our imagination all the time. So here is King Ethelbert and the arrival of Christianity into England. Now, what is special about the arrival of Christianity? Christianity brought in Latin again to England. Latin was there, and then it was wiped out by Anglo-Saxons, and Latin came back to England in a big way. So just as Old English was growing and developing, you have a strong influence of Latin coming into England through Christianity. And that was one threat to English at that time. Nobody would have felt that. But today, looking back at the history of this language, we feel that that was one point when there was a big threat to English language that was from Latin that came into Christianity. Can you please mute all the mics?
Yes, sir. Sir, please unmute.
Yeah, I have unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Okay, sir. Definitely.
Yes?
Okay, sir.
Right. So the first threat to English came in the form of Latin, but it was there and English went on surviving. And then you had, after a couple of centuries, another major threat to English language coming in. It was not always, this threat was not only to English language, it was also a threat to the English speaking community, the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, and which was from the Vikings. We have always heard of Vikings. Here is a picture, a photograph of a man. This is not really a Viking. He is a modern actor who is, who has dressed up like a Viking standing before a museum in the city of York. The city of York in England is very important because there's a lot of archaeological evidence, several layers of the Celtic civilization, the Roman civilization, and then the strong presence of Vikings or Norsemen in England. And the Vikings are also called Scandinavians. So you would have heard of Scandinavian influence in English language. So they are called Norsemen or people from the north. All these names are there. And Vikings are very important. Vikings, who were the Vikings? Vikings were also Germanic people. So we have heard of Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. Vikings also had different tribes, and Vikings was a common name they applied to all these different tribes. And they were also a kind of Germanic people. They belonged to the North Germanic branch of the language. So they also spoke a similar language at that time. So today in English, in the second major influx of another language, Scandinavian presence is very strong in English even today. And that happened through the series of Viking invasions that happened in the 6th, 7th, 8th centuries. It began as early as maybe 7th century and went on till 10th century. So Vikings, second peril from Vikings. And here, this is an image of the England. This is a map of England during the Viking time. So about 1020 AD, how England would have looked like. So this is the North Sea, and the Vikings mostly came from these places. Attack came from this country. I've written Jorvik here. You see that Jorvik is the land of the Vikings, and they in fact came to England and occupied many parts of England at a point of time. So we had the Anglo-Saxons being slowly subjugated by the Vikings at one point. That there was a cultural and linguistic subjugation of the Anglo-Saxons by the Vikings at a point of time. That was another peril that the English language faced in its history. And when we talk about Viking and when we talk about the history of English language, it's very important to think of King Alfred. He is called King Alfred the Great of England. Not many English kings are remembered as great. So King Alfred is remembered as King Alfred the Great. And that you might remember another king, King Arthur. But remember that King Arthur was a legendary kind of person. He was a Celtic king. King Arthur and King Lear, for that matter, were Celtic kings. They are believed to have lived and ruled in England before the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes came. So technically they are not English people. King Arthur was not English, he was Celtic. Though Arthurian legends became very popular among English people in the Middle Ages. So King Alfred and King Arthur are entirely two different people. So I am saying it in case you're confused. We have King Alfred, but he's a documented person. Historically he existed, and we have a lot of information about him, though we do not know where he is buried. That is not known. But long time ago, all these things happened quite a long time back. Yeah. So King Alfred is remembered today for two things. One, for his engagement with the Vikings, and also for his immense contribution to the English language. Perhaps if King Alfred did not live and rule and contribute to language, English language would not have had this much Englishness in it. By Englishness, I mean the remnants of Old English. We would have had, maybe English would have been replaced by French language. So he had a very important role to play in the history of English language. So I was saying that the Vikings were creating a lot of problem in England, and they had begun their attack from the north, and then they were moving southwards. Let us take a look again. We must remember that this area here, this area is Wessex. You have Wessex, and not fully. This part is called Wessex, and this area is called Kent. And modern days, Canterbury would be somewhere here, and the place called Dover is also somewhere in Kent. And as we go north, you have Northumbria. You have a river here called Humber. Humber River is here. Sorry, Humber is here, just above Yorwick, and the part above Humber is called Northumbria. So Northumbria, this part is called Mercia, and all these here is Mercia, and this is Anglia. All these parts were these are ancient names, were totally occupied by the invading Vikings, and they were a lot of linguistic influence was also happening at that time. And King Alfred was the ruler of Wessex. But even though he ruled from Wessex, there was already a union between all these countries, and long back a heptarchy was established, and already there was a notion of England, and he ruled over all these areas, and he won a major victory over the Vikings in the Battle of Edington in 878. That's historically a very important event, both in English history and history of English language. The Battle of Edington, in which King Alfred was able to win a major victory over the Vikings. He did not kick them all out. That was not possible. He entered into a treaty with them, the treaty which is called Treaty of Wetmore. Please mute the microphones.
All the participants, please mute your microphones.
Can you centrally do it, sir? Okay, so I've written a name here, Guthrum. Guthrum doesn't sound English. He's a Scandinavian name. It's the name of a Viking ruler. You have the famous picture of Guthrum bowing down before King Alfred after the Battle of Edington. Battle of Edington is believed to have been a very bloody battle with so many people killed, and the streams flowing red with the blood of the people killed in the battle. And you have Guthrum, who was the leader, who was defeated, and he submitted before Alfred. And Alfred, being a wise king, entered into a treaty with the Vikings, and some kind of peace was established, which in fact continued. So that was a major achievement. And an area was allotted to the Vikings later on. It came to be called Danelaw inside England. So that is Alfred's achievement in terms of establishing peace with the Vikings. But today he's remembered also. And one thing we need to remember is the Vikings were very destructive in their behavior, just like the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes were very destructive when they came to England originally in the 4th, 5th centuries. The Vikings were also destructive. They vandalized things, vandalized buildings. They destroyed libraries. They destroyed churches. They burned down whole villages. And the word vandal today came from the name of a Viking tribe. That's very interesting. We today call about vandalizing, and Vandals were a North Germanic tribe of people belonging broadly in the category of Vikings. So they vandalized a lot. And in fact, many books which were written and kept in scrolls and manuscripts were destroyed by the Vikings during their long invasions. King Alfred was able to preserve many of these in England, in Wessex, in his libraries, which he controlled. And he translated many works that were written in other languages, particularly in other dialects. For example, today we have a book named Beowulf, which is considered to be the earliest epic in Europe, and also one of the earliest works written in Old English. It is believed that Beowulf was written outside England before English came into England. As I said, English was not born in England. Before English came to England, this book was already there. It was originally, what shall we say, created, because I can't say written because writing came later. It was composed maybe in an Anglican dialect, but Anglian dialect. Later, Alfred had it written down in the West Saxon dialect. So we have the modern manuscript of Beowulf in the West Saxon. This happened to many books. So that was a big contribution of Alfred. He commissioned the creation of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. He translated many major works from Latin into English, and also had many works preserved for future generations. Big contribution to English language. But towards the end of the Old English period, after Alfred the Great died, there was changes happening in English language even within, particularly due to changes in time, changes in lifetime, as that civilization, that culture grew, and also due to the influence of the Scandinavians, Vikings, Old North, all same influence. So when land is occupied by another group of people speaking a different language, even though these languages belong to the same family, a lot of changes will happen in the language, particularly in grammar, in vocabulary, in pronunciation, in all aspects of the language, changes will happen. So due to Scandinavian influence, due to and natural causes, Old English was changing at that time. And there was a considerable reduction of inflections. What is inflection is word endings. The Germanic language and its mother, Indo-European, were highly inflected languages, just like Indian languages are, just like Sanskrit or Hindi, and even our the Southern Indian dialects, languages, all are highly inflected. But English depends a lot on in grammatical words. We don't have, inflect means have grammatical endings, I can't give examples in Malayalam because there are other speakers as well. But we won't spend much time on that. We will just say that there was a big reduction of inflections. That means English became easier than other Germanic languages at that time. There was a kind of leveling of inflections. And historically, after Alfred, there was an array of weak kings, and there was a time when the Scandinavians ruled England. There was a king called King Canute, who is again a semi-legend kind of person who came after Alfred. He was a Scandinavian ruler of England. He is also called King Canute the Great. So Anglo-Saxon would mean English. that means belonging to one of those tribes which came and settled in England, or or the future generations of them. So you remember, already we have in England Celtic presence, Roman presence, Anglo-Saxon presence, and also Scandinavian presence. So English language has many features today. We say that English language is difficult because of this, because of singularity in pronunciation. We have problem in spelling. All these you will understand better when we look back at the history of English. What happened to English language over all these perilous times. So the kings were weak after Alfred, and then finally there was a king called Edward the Confessor. Edward the Confessor was a very pious king. He was perhaps the last but one Anglo-Saxon king who ruled peacefully for a while. So let's remember Edward the Confessor. He did not have children. So when he died, his relative, Harold Godwinson, remembered in history as King Harold II, became the ruler of England in 1066. Now, we have looked at English history from its beginnings until 1066, which is the 11th century, and the Roman period. After the Roman period and after the coming of English people in England, say 600 years or less than that, is called Old English period. And now we are moving out of Old English period. And the historic event that marks this shift is what I'm dealing with right now. So Edward the Confessor, the King of England, Anglo-Saxon king, he died. And he was followed by Harold Godwinson. Harold Godwinson was not the direct heir of Edward. There were two other people who believed they had a claim to the English throne. One was Harald Hardrada. He was a Scandinavian. He was a Viking king living in Europe. You remember the picture I showed you of Denmark, etc. He was living somewhere there. Harald Hardrada. He believed he had a claim over the English throne. And then another gentleman named William of Normandy. He was living in France, part of France. He also believed he had a claim over the English throne. So first, soon after Harold settled down as the King of England, Harold Hardrada attacked England, and King Harold was able to defeat him at the Battle of Stamford Bridge on the 25th of September, 1066. Look at these dates because everything happened in a very short period of time. Hardrada was defeated. That was the final attempt of the Vikings to take over England was foiled, and he was killed in the battle. But as the battle was going on, you had another thing happening. William of Normandy landed in England with a reasonably large army, and then a battle ensued. And finally, on 14 October 1066, at the Battle of Hastings, Harold II was killed. It's a big historic event in English history. Harold II being killed in the Battle of Hastings. So the importance is that Harold II was the last Anglo-Saxon king. So that marks the end of what is called the Old English period, the death of Harold at Hastings. Here I have for you the picture of a tapestry. A tapestry is a long embroidered thing. It's about 60 meters long. And you can see the width here, but it is too long to see on screen. This is called the Bayeux tapestry. It's called the Bayeux tapestry. And the Bayeux tapestry is still there, and it is in display in a museum in France. And this was created at that time. And it shows the Norman invasion, what happened before that and what happened during the Norman invasion and what happened immediately after is embroidered. It's a very important historic document, the Bayeux tapestry. And here you have, this person is Harold. So if you look very carefully, there is an arrow here. And it is believed that in the war, he was killed by an arrow that went into his eye. So this is historic for English language students, and for the learners of European history and literature. This is an interesting document, the Bayeux tapestry. Well, after that, what happened was there was a total change. There was total chaos because England was taken over systematically and completely by a foreign rulers. So again, I said, remember the three families: Celtic family, Roman family, and the Germanic family. At present, here you have Germanic people living in England, and they were attacked by Vikings. They were also Germanic. But now you have, and Latin is there, that is Roman language. And here you have another variety of Latin coming in, a language that evolved from Latin much later, which is the Norman French. So the French language came into England, and from about 1100 to 1500, this is the third peril. The English language was nearly wiped out of England, but it survived. That is another interesting thing. But English language changed drastically, immensely during the Middle English period. This is the Middle English period after the conquest of England by William of Normandy. He came to be known as William the First of England, and English changed immensely. And because the whole aristocracy was replaced by French lords and ladies. And this is an interesting example. English language and simply thousands and thousands of words came to English language from French. They were borrowed as such. So even today you have many words. For example, words ending in OIR, as in reservoir. So we say reservoir, a dam where water is collected. It is, or a person with a lot of information, we say he is a reservoir. It's reservoir. And Garage is pronounced garage in English, but we tend to pronounce it as garage, but it is garage because it's a French loan word. And in French language, they would pronounce it somewhat like age. Age is age. For example, the French equivalent of courage would have been courage. So you see the sh sound. So the sh sound probably came into England from French. So you have that big leap happening. This is relevant in modern days as well. We have problem with many English words where the pronunciation is different. The other day, we were discussing about how G-E-N-R-E is pronounced. G-E-N-R-E, whether it is to be pronounced as genre or genre or whatever. G-E-N-R-E is a French word. And in French, it would be pronounced, the R sound in French is very tricky. It's very different from English sound. It is articulated somewhere inside your mouth. It is similar to the ha sound. For example, the French word M-E-R-C-I, M-E-R-C-I, which means, thank you, mercy, mercy is earthy. That's the sound happens somewhere inside. I do not know French, so I can't articulate it well. It is something like mercy. So G-E-N-R-E would be genre. Genre, sorry, not genre, genre. In French, it would be somewhat like genre. So in modern English, we cannot pronounce it as genre because we don't know the hara sound, which is in French. So the approximate thing would be genre. So this problem we have a regular problem with English pronunciation. And the reason is that everything, all this confusion happened during this particular period I'm talking about, 1100 to 1500, when many English words were spelt in a French manner. Many French words came into English, and the English people themselves probably did not know the pronunciation. Interestingly, remember, we may have problem with genre when we see it for the first time. Believe me, an English person who hasn't heard that word will also have the problem. He or she wouldn't know how it is pronounced unless he refers to a dictionary. So we don't have to feel bad that our pronunciation is not that good, because English pronunciation is not in concordance with its spelling. Therefore, we have to learn it afresh. It's a natural thing. So that is another topic. But I was drawing your attention to the fact that all that began particularly during this big mix, as I have called it, during 1100 to 1500. And here is an interesting thing. These words: deer, pig, cow, sheep. These are all English, Old English words, Anglo-Saxon words. And because in England, after the Norman invasion, the English people were doing all the work, and the Romans were living in their palaces and mansions, and they were enjoying the fruits of the labor of the English people. So the deer were hunted by the ordinary peasant, the pigs were reared and killed and cooked by the ordinary person, cow or ox were cooked and reared and cooked by ordinary person, sheep were grown by ordinary person, but the food was eaten by the French lords. And all these
Sir, can you unmute?
Yeah. Am I audible? I hope I am audible. The words venison, which means meat of deer, pork and bacon, which are different meats of pig, beef, meat of cow or ox, sheep, the meat of sheep is mutton. Mutton, beef, pork, bacon, venison are all French words. So this is a common example which we always say about the impact of the French conquest, not French conquest, Norman conquest. Norman French was slightly different from the French that was spoken in Paris and other parts at that time, but we can say it is more or less French influence. And these words are all from Norman French. And a large number of English words today related to administration, law, banking, rule, church, etc., all came from our borrowings from French. So this was a time when hundreds and thousands of English words were lost. Anglo-Saxon words were lost, and they were replaced with French words like chivalry, related to the word, or related to cavalry, related to horse. The word chivalry has its etymological relationship with the word horse. Exchequer, French word. Falcon, the name of the bird. Falconry was a big thing among the lords of those times. The word justice, and dozens and thousands of words are all of English have been borrowed as such from French, but the spelling might have been changed a bit. Pronunciation must have got anglicized, as I said, both. Some are kind of neither here nor there, but some have totally French pronunciation even today. So the word exchequer has another story. You know, exchequer, the word exchequer came from the fact that a king had his lords, he would levy tax on them. And the tax money would be arranged on a checkered cloth, so that, you have different colored boxes and the money will be kept so that the counting is easy. And that is how the word exchequer came. Little bit of vocabulary there. So we are now in the Middle English period. So in the Middle English period, we have two important people who had a very significant role to play in English history, and those were Chaucer. I'm not spending much time on Chaucer. This is a page of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Chaucer died in 1400, and printing came to England only in about 76 years after that. He died in 1400, and printing came to England full swing in 1476. And this was one of the first pages that ever was printed in England. It was printed by William Caxton. So I've brought this here. This slide is here for the reason that William Caxton had a very important role in English literary and linguistic history. Like King Alfred did, he also he established the printing press in England. That is one momentous event, very historically important event. Though printing was, there was printing in different parts of the world. In China, they had printing technology. We are talking about Europe. In Europe, printing was brought in by John Gutenberg, as we know, and the first book to be printed was the Bible, Gutenberg's Bible. The translation that he did from, not he did, the German translation of the Bible, which is called Gutenberg's Bible. But that's another story. In England, printing was brought in by William Caxton, and his contribution is that he translated many works into English. And in fact, the first book to be printed in England was this Recueil of the Histories of Troy. Recueil means collection of stories from Trojan War, published in 1470. This was printed in Europe, but the work was done by William Caxton. That was actually the first book to be printed in English language, 1473. And later, the printing press was set in England 3 years later, and the book, first book, perhaps one of the earliest books, and perhaps the very first book to be printed was Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. The importance is that English language was beginning to come back as a major language in England. That's a very important thing. In this, even in 15th century, in the early 15th century, Chaucer was born, 14th century, I mean. Chaucer was born in early 14th century, maybe 1340 or something. We do not know exactly when he was born. He was born during the reign of Edward III. And Edward III was, in the line from William the First Conqueror, 1066. Many generations have passed. But even in in 1340, 1345, when Edward III was ruling England. He belonged to this Norman French lineage. He also spoke French largely. So after that, you had Richard II, Henry IV, Henry V. Gradually, we see that Shakespeare has documented these also. We see that English is becoming more and more predominant. And the contact of the French kings in England began to decrease. They had French provinces as well. They were all mostly lost. And finally, the kings of the French line also began to marry people from England, and the noblemen began to marry French nobility, marrying ladies from England, and English language the mix was going on. And finally, out of this mixture, out of this cauldron of mixing, English language emerged afresh, and that credit goes a lot to Chaucer and Caxton. And in 1485, some 9 years after the printing press was established, we had the Tudor ascendancy in England. In 1485, the Tudor monarch named King Henry VII became the ruler of England. Not the gentleman in the picture here. This is a different person. King Henry VII became the ruler of England. And from then on, you had maybe the peril of that English language faced from foreign invasions, foreign linguistic influence, etc., was resolved. And from that time onwards, there was stability in England, and also a great creative flowering began to happen. And after Henry VII, you had this gentleman. He is Henry VIII, very famous king who married 6 times. He divorced a few, and a few died. And finally, his last wife, Catherine, there were 3 of his wives had the name Catherine, and the last Catherine outlived him. Yeah. So this is King Henry VIII. And I am coming historically to another event. This picture here on the right side is a ruin. And some of you might remember that this is the Tintern Abbey, as it looks today. Tintern Abbey. Wordsworth has written a poem, Tintern Abbey lines, which are very, very famous. And this is the Tintern Abbey. And the Tintern Abbey looks very funny. It doesn't have a roof. It has nothing. It's a Tintern Abbey. Even the place where Wordsworth visited was very similar. Much changes had not happened. Tintern Abbey was in ruins when William Wordsworth visited it, and he was inspired to write the lines. So what happened at Tintern Abbey? Not only Tintern Abbey, there you will find in England hundreds of churches like this, which are in ruins, which they preserve and keep. And this destruction, everything happened during the reign of Henry VIII. Henry VIII had a problem with the Pope, the Catholic Church, because he wanted divorce from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. He wanted to marry a lady named Anne Boleyn, but the church did not allow. So he broke with the church, and he established a church of his own, which is Anglican Church, the Protestant English Church. And he sent his soldiers on a rampage, and they went all over England and plundered all the monasteries and brought all the wealth to the royal coffers. Well, that is something he did. Its importance is that he became wealthy, partly because the royal coffers became wealthy, partly because of the plunder that was going on. He was followed by his daughter Elizabeth. There were 2 other monarchs in between, but very short period. He was followed by Elizabeth I, who also developed a large navy, a very efficient navy, and England became a strong power under Elizabeth I. The background was created by her grandfather, Henry VII, and her father, Henry VIII. And remember, Elizabeth was the daughter of Henry's second wife, Anne Boleyn, whom he married after divorcing his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. And you might be curious to know what happened to Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn had her head cut off. King Henry did not like her after a couple of years from marriage, and he had her head cut off, and he married a third woman, and her name was Jane Seymour, which is another story. Okay, so we'll come to the next slide. Now, why I talked about Henry VIII and the Navy, etc., is that with the naval force, with the building of big ships, English language could move out of England. So now the journey ends. and another kind of journey begins, which is also perilous, where the English people began to move to other countries, colonizing, plundering, looting, etc. It's said that the word loot is of Indian origin, and that is one of the words that came into English. When they, many countries at that time did that. The English did that, the Dutch did that, the French did that, the Portuguese did that, the Spaniards did that. They had naval power and they went to different parts of the world and plundered them. And English people came to India and they established East India Company in 1600. Those who are interested in history will be curious to know that Elizabeth I and Akbar of India ruled in the almost similar years. Elizabeth came to power in 58 and died in 1603. And Akbar came to the throne, the Mughal emperor. At that time, Mughal empire was reasonably big and much of northern and central India were under the Mughal rule. And Akbar came into on the throne in 1556 and he died in 1605, or he left the throne and his kingship ended in 1605. So similar years. I think both of them, their period ended with their deaths. And Elizabeth surely was queen until she died. Well, it can be said notionally that East India Company was established with the permission of Elizabeth, and with the we are not sure if Akbar knew about it, but the East India though the East India Company was formed with the signature of Elizabeth or the sanction of Elizabeth in 1600, it became fully established only some time back, later, maybe around 1612, when Akbar was no longer ruling. After Akbar, like Jahangir, etc., later on, there were weaker monarchs, and East India Company could bargain and they could kind of cheat and gain more land in England. We know all those stories. So East India Company ruled from 1612 to 1757, and then they did not rule. They were present in India at that time, and they began to rule large parts of India. Not India. It's historically wrong to say they ruled India, because geographically today the nation India was not there at that time. And by India at that time, we mean Afghanistan, we mean Sri Lanka, we mean Pakistan, we mean and all those, Burma, all those areas were all under one umbrella at that time. East India Company was not ruling India alone. Many other neighboring countries were also under their control. And the company rule in India, we believe we know is from 1757 to 1858. And from 1858, we call the British Raj, when after the Sepoy mutiny, or the first war of independence in India, the Queen directly began to rule England. At that time, it was Victoria. And we had the Viceroy in India ruling. Anyway, so why did I talk about this? Because to trace the evolution, the English coming to India in early 17th century, growing rapidly, and we are sitting here today talking in English. The legacy. English moves out of England and it reaches India. And around the same time, the Pilgrim Fathers landed in 1620. The Pilgrim Fathers were English people who, a major settlement in England was made by them. And this is a picture of the English people being welcomed by the natives of America. And I have quoted some lines from The Tempest, which was written some 15 years or so before this incident happened. And it kind of foresees what happened in America at that time. These are the words of Caliban, where Caliban says, complains that Prospero came to this island, and this island was mine, and I was peacefully living here. Prospero came, and I showed him all the secrets of the island, and I welcomed him. So the image of Caliban can be seen in these people, and Prospero in these people. It is as if Shakespeare foresaw what was going to happen. And these people welcomed the English people, and they showed them where water was and what was good to eat. It was a totally new geographical area with totally new animals and plants, and all these things were learned. But what happened after they had settled was, I wouldn't say it is all a planned thing. The story of a huge carnage, and the native, we all know that the native Americans, the native Indians of America were nearly totally wiped out. And you know the history, the bitter history. So this is a story of colonization in every part of the world. In India, it was in a different shape. That's all. They could not wipe us out because we were more advanced by the time the English people and the Dutch people and the French people came to India. India was already, we had, though India as a huge nation called India was not there, different pockets, we had advanced systems of rule here, and that's why they did not destroy, but they manage things in a different way. Well, these lines, I'll just read and leave. The words of Caliban about his little island, which is now controlled by Prospero. I must eat my dinner, the island is mine, which thou takest from me. When thou first came, thou strokest me and made much of me. Wood gives me water with berries in it, that is coffee. Teach me how to name the light, bigger light, that is the sun, and how the less, which is the moon, that burn by day and night. It means Prospero gave Caliban language to speak. That is his language. Probably Caliban had his language, but Prospero gave him his language, just as the English people gave the colonies English. And the people of the colonies began to write back to the English people using that very same language. And then I loved thee and showed thee all the qualities of the island, the fresh springs, brine pits, barren place, fertile. We know the story. Now, I was just incidentally bringing it in to show that story of colonization. India was not totally colonized as the English people did to the USA, because America was sparsely populated, and the people did not have much resistance, so they could kind of totally replace and establish an English nation there. But in India, it was a different kind of story, because we already had a very advanced civilization in India at that time, compared to the US situation, American situation. And then English people moved to Australia in the 1800th century. You had James Cook making his voyages to England, to Australia, charting much of Australia, many regions. And finally, the English people established a penal colony in 1788, which is, they began to send prisoners to that island. We know the story. And that is how Australia also became an English-speaking country. India did not become an English-speaking country, but English became a strong presence in India. And I think I may need to conclude, but I'll go quickly. Here is the concept of Englishes. Today, we say that English is not one language. We say that English is different languages. There are Englishes, many types of English. Just like Anglo-Saxons and Jews spoke different dialects. English has developed different dialects. And in the Indian-born scholar Braj B. Kachru, he talks about three circles. The inner circle, which is where English is the first language or mother tongue. Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Canada, USA, UK, West Indies, where English is the mother tongue. And you have the outer circle, where and then you where English is second language. I'll define what second language is. And also the expanding circle, where English is foreign language. So here, inner circle, English is first language. First language is mother tongue. So English, we say that Malayalam is my L1, my first language. So that is my mother tongue. And the outer circle today would be in second language situation. So like India, English is not foreign to us. There is a strong English presence. So we say English is our second language. So in the outer circle, English is second language. In the expanding circle, which is ever widening, which is, English is foreign language for them. For example, in Japan or Korea or Russia, they have all their learning in their own language, but and no English there. But now they are learning quite a lot of English, because English is a major language in the world, the language of the internet, language of business, etc. So they learn English. They learn everything else in their mother tongue, their technology, their medical science, everything is in their language, but they learn English for international communication only. So we say that is an EFL situation. So outer circle is where English is more, the English presence is much strong. There can be movement. For example, Singapore might move from outer circle to the inner circle soon, because Singapore is becoming predominantly English speaking. Well, I'm just introducing these three circles to you. And today, coming to modern days, this is early 20th century. The screenshot is from the movie My Fair Lady, based on George Bernard Shaw's novel Pygmalion. It's about English language. So I'm trying to talk about the major varieties of English and the concept of standard English. Today we have many varieties of English, as I said. So these lines: look at her, a prisoner of the gutter, condemned by every syllable she utters. By right, she should be taken out and hung for the cold-blooded murder of the English tongue. Here you have Professor Higgins, the specialist of English, who represents perhaps Bernard Shaw's views, talking about this flower girl who speaks a very unrefined English, and he says she should be hanged because she speaks bad English. So that was the attitude in early 20th century among the scholars. I mean, so we talk about modernism in early century, where everybody complained that the world has become fragmented. In the same way, English was becoming, all over the colonies, people began to speak, and English was being spoken in different ways, not in the way they spoke in the universities or in the schools in London. People were speaking English in many ways across the world. And this view was there initially, that there should be a standard English. And, Bernard Shaw was very keen on that. But the fact is that that is not possible. It is never going to be possible. So our aim is also not to speak a standard English. That is not going to be. Accept the varieties of English is very important. And well, I'll just note this down. And we need to know these words: dialects, accents, and slang, words that we often have confusion with. Dialect is a regional variety of a language. We all know. People living in Karnataka will know that in different parts of Karnataka, they have different forms of Kannada and Telugu or Malayalam, Tamil, everything has this. And this regional variety is called a dialect. For example, the word take is pronounced taik in some dialects inside England. Inside England, there are people who speak take as taik. And I have a friend who would say from England, who would use taik and he would say I instead of a in friendly conversation. But when he gives a lecture, he would consciously say take. So just as we do that, we from different parts of the state will have our own dialects. When we take a class, we'll kind of use a different kind of accent. So accent is the way we pronounce. So accent is part of the dialect, but it is a way in which we pronounce. It's accent. Accent is the vocalized part of a regional dialect. American, Australian, New Zealandish, and all these are actually different dialects of English. But today we can't call them dialects. They are all national varieties of language. So when a dialect is kind of used by a large group of people, we call it a variety. And we say there's an American variety. And we see ads which offer to teach you American English, American spoken English. But that again is an interesting question. There is no such thing as a standard American English. There is different parts of America, people speak America differently. There are hundreds of dialects inside America also. So it's also hard to say there is an Indian English, because English spoken by me living in Kerala would be very different from the English spoken in another part of India, because my English is influenced by Malayalam. The person living in Gujarat would be influenced by Gujarati. That is there. So you can't say there is an Indian English. Well, I'm just leaving these to your thoughts, because there is always a danger in giving labels to things. There is always this possibility of going beyond labels and accepting the varieties. And slang is, again, nothing to do with pronunciation. Slang is informal expressions that we use. So miffed is an informal expression that people use to say, I'm offended. And stoned means he is totally drunk. And boomer is a word that I learned from my son today morning. He was talking, to him, I would be a boomer, because I was born in the 60s and I am an old generation person. And the people who were born maybe in the 70s and 80s, 90s and 2000s, people living in that time were, if they say, call me a boomer, my son did not call me a boomer. If he did, it would mean an old-fashioned person, a person who holds old-fashioned views. This word might change, slangs change. Slangs do not remain for long, but some slang words become legitimatized, etc. But I just wanted you to know that the word slang means an informal expression. There are simply dozens of slang words in our speech every day. We wouldn't use a slang word while taking a class or giving a presentation, but while talking to family or close friends, our language will be filled with many informal expressions which come and go. Those are slang words. Well, so I'm concluding. I would say that we talk about the King's English, the British English, the Queen's English, BBC English, etc., as if that is the model. Well, it's good to have that as a model, but English is not the King's property. It is your property and it's mine. So English is international language. We value English as a product for a pragmatic reason, not well, those who love literature would be happy about English. We have fondness about English because we grew reading English literature. That is totally fine. English literature perhaps should lead you to other European literature and also our own literature. All that is fine. Literature itself transports you to a aesthetic realm which is unimitable and cannot be attained by any other people. But about the language, today we value English. We talk a lot about English because English is the international language, and it is your language. It's my language. It's a language of everybody in that sense. But the importance is that, so it doesn't mean that we can speak English any way we like. And to use Professor Higgins' expression, speaking English any way they like. He say that in My Fair Lady. That's not it. And it also doesn't mean we go for a standard kind of English, which is impossible. Two things we need to keep in mind. When you speak English, the other person should understand. Not only your friends, not only your peer group, but international intelligibility should be there in your English. And your English should not only be understood, it should also be a little elegant so that you will be accepted in international communities. Why I'm saying is today, the world is becoming a single village and you are often judged by your language. And I'm not saying it is right. We should not judge a person by the language, but the corporate world out there is not that sensitive. They might reject you if you are not kind of intelligible and acceptable. For that practical reason, we need to keep in mind that we need to improve our pronunciation into a more acceptable level. It will always be Indian. It will always be yours. That is fine. But try to make it more intelligible. That means you focus a little bit more on your pronunciation, learn more about it. Not that you try to speak like the Queen, but that you speak a language that is intelligible and acceptable. So that is my talk. I have been tracing the history of English over the last 2,000 years or so. And so we have come up to the present time. Thank you very much for listening. I'll be very happy to take questions, and I will respond if I have the information to do that. Thank you again.
Sorry, sir. Hello?
Yes, I have concluded.
Okay, sir. Okay,
yes.
sir.
Yes.
Okay, okay, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Can you all hear me? Thank you, sir, Professor Lal, for your insightful and thought-provoking presentation. We are fascinated, sir, by your scholastic ability and well explained about the history of English language through centuries. And I'm sure that the participants have enriched a lot differences of dialect, accent, and slang, and also how English language journeyed to all over the world. Really, you are captivated us a lot by your wonderful presentation with the numerous examples. Thank you, sir. Now, let's start our questions and answer session, sir.
Yes.
Participants are requested to interact and clarify your doubts. You can post your queries in the chat box. So, young Josephine, BBIT College is asking, why English language is a hard journey?
Well, English journey is not hard. I was, in fact, there are 2 points to it. One is that English language had a hard journey in its history. That is one point I wanted to stress. But I wanted to stress that because I wanted to draw your attention to several points in English history which have an impact on modern English. Secondly, many people in our country believe that English is hard. Well, I am trying to tell them that English is not hard. You need to take an interest in it, look at it from like any other discipline. The funny thing is we are able to, we have such intelligence that we are cracking the most difficult problems. We have the knowledge to put a man on the moon, but still we say that English is difficult. That is because perhaps of the blocks that still remain from the colonial days when the impression was created that English is very difficult. It is not difficult. It needs to be approached in the right manner. So that is what I was trying to say. We don't have to speak like English people do, because English people cannot speak Telugu like we do, can they? They can never do that. We can ever improve. So I use that word hard journey and perilous, etc. Half humorously. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you, sir. Here is the question, sir. And what caused the Old English to develop into English today?
Well, in fact, that is what I was saying. Old English is just in fact, these words, Old English, Middle English, are all arbitrary. We are now looking at history, just like we say that there was a period called the Paleolithic Age and the Neolithic Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age. We just categorize that. So Old English happens to be the stage in English from about 5th century to, say, 11th century period. It's just a name. So, you saw that through Scandinavian influence, through French influence, through interaction. And I told you about people coming to India. And Indian languages have enriched English like anything. Big influence of English, Indian language is there. Indian vocabulary. So you can just sit and say many words, including the South Indian Tamil word mulagatanni. Mulagatanni is basically water with mulag in it. It became mulligatawny soup. So you pay mulligatawny soup. Yeah, that's all actually. Old English is just a word.
Many influences, French influence, Scandinavian influence, Latin influence, Greek influence. There are many influences.
Many influences. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And one more question, sir, from our participants. And what are the factors that contributed to the growth of English language? What are the factors?
Well, that is, again, it's a repetition of what we said. All the factors we discussed, yes.
Yes. And from Archana, St. Teresa's College for Women, how did the English language spread around the world?
English language spread again.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. Through I was also tracing it from the Tudor wealth and Tudor order, and then geographical discoveries. For economic reasons, the English people traveled and dominated different parts of the world, and the language naturally came along with that. And I see a question there called role of Pilgrim Fathers land in evolution of English language.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
it was I was just saying that was the major settlement, the first major settlement of English people in the new land called America. We call that after Amerigo Vespucci, and it was discovered, we say discovered by Columbus, though people were already there when Columbus went there. And the first English settlement was that as the Pilgrim Fathers, the beginning of English, and that became an English nation. Though in America today, we have a large number of Spanish-speaking people, Chinese-speaking people, Indian communities are there today. They call America as a melting pot. Primarily, it's predominantly an English-speaking nation. And that all began with the coming of the Pilgrim Fathers.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And one more question, sir. How did the Old English became modern English?
Old English did not become modern English. Old English evolved into modern English. And good that you asked that question. Modern English is not the English we speak today. Modern English would be, Shakespeare's English is also modern English. I talked about about Henry VII coming into power in 1485. That can be said to mark the beginning of what is called modern English period. At least from 1500, it is modern English period, and particularly marked by the big change called the Great Vowel Shift, which went on during that time. Modern English began at that. That's because you cannot read and understand Canterbury Tales without external help. But if you sit and take some pains, you may be able to understand Shakespeare much more than that. And the difference between Shakespeare and Canterbury Tales is only about 200 years. But from Shakespeare to us, it is 600 years. So the modern English begins around 1500. And it's all evolution. One morning, things do not change. It's just evolution.
Thank you. Thank you, sir,
Yes.
for your lively interaction. And now, dear participants, I sincerely appreciate your overwhelming response, and it's your quest and your thirst for knowledge that has brought together all of us and encouraged us to move forward. And one important note for your attention, dear delegates, I request all the participants, a feedback and assessment form link will be shared to your registered mail. Any certificate will be generated after successful submission of your feedback. I request Mrs. T. Sirisha, lecturer in English, to express words of gratitude. Sirisha, ma'am, please come online.
Okay, madam. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the management of JMJ College for Women, Autonomous Tenali, I express a deep sense of gratitude and thanks to Professor Lal CA, who shared his valuable time in spite of his busy schedule and presenting his knowledge to the student community. He enlightened the perilous journey of English language development in various periods and language families. Dear sir, your presentation was excellent and enriching the students about Old English. We thank you wholeheartedly for your availability and sharing your insight and intelligence with us. Once again, thank you, sir. I express my gratitude to Dr. Sister Teresamma Gade, the correspondent of JMJ College for Women Tenali, for her support to organize this webinar. Thank you, sister. I am indeed grateful to Dr. Sister Shaidi KP, Principal, for her constant encouragement and guidance to organize this webinar. Thank you, sister. I congratulate all the participants for their active participation in this event. As no program can become successful with a single person, I extend my thanks to all my members in the Department of English, Mr. Murali and Mr. Ravi, for extending their technical support. Once again, I thank God, all the participants and others for your contribution and making this webinar a grand success. Thank you once again. Wow. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am, for the words of gratitude. Now, let's have a glimpse of our J&J College for Women Tenali. It's just a 2 minutes video about our college. Please join our college tour.
Welcome to J&J Education Dream World, J&J College for Women Tenali.
Acharya Nagarjuna University adjudged the college as one of the best colleges in the university.
The college was conferred autonomous status and was reaccredited by NAC with B grade and recognized as college with potential for excellence.
J&J College has 51 years of glorious history where thousands of students molded into women of wisdom and character.
Nearly 30,000 students have graduated and many of the alumni of our college are working as government officers, scientists, doctors, professors, engineers and social workers both in India and different parts of the world.
Campus placements is assured to all the skilled students. The unique features of J&J College education is absolute discipline, highly qualified and well-experienced faculty, ICT, teaching and learning, green campus, spacious classrooms and laboratories, AD playground, air-conditioned cyber world, good cafeteria and glorious eco park, gym and beautiful hostel.
Come, visit, experience and cherish J&J education and climb the ladder of success.
Courses offered: intermediate all groups, degree courses BA, BCom, BSc and BBA, PG courses MSc, MA and MCom, career-oriented programs, multimedia and duty care science.
Courses offered for 10th and 12th dropouts, paramedical and healthcare, fashion designing.
Certificate courses: medical lab technology, MLT, tailoring and embroidery, desktop publishing, DTP.
Admissions are in progress. Please contact S.R. Shani, Principal, mobile number 94416-13054.
A warm welcome to dear parents and students. J&J College for Women, Autonomous, Tenali. Mobile number 9700-165-855.
Thank you all. I congratulate you all the participants for your commitment and active participation for making this national webinar a grand success, and I wish you all the best. Thank you, one and all. Thank you once again.